You've been holding so much lately, and no one sees it all. Not the weariness, not the memories that wake you at night, not the small tears you blink away before anyone notices, but God sees, and He's here. So stop scrolling now. Come rest with Jesus. You don't have to be strong tonight. You don't have to explain your heart. This story was made for you, for the quiet part of your soul that's ready to be wrapped in peace. Close your eyes if you'd like. Let the light fade and listen, because this is where God comes gently and whispers, "I've never let go of you." He will cover you with His feathers, and under His wings you will find refuge. Psalm 91:4. There was a house on the hill, not a grand house, not one that drew eyes or postcards, but one where the windows always held the light just right. And the porch, oh, the porch was kind. It faced the east, where the dawn always came faithfully, soft-footed, like a promise whispered before the day had the chance to shout. And on that porch, every morning for 43 years, sat a woman named Elaine. She had grey in her hair and sunlight in her hands. Even on cloudy days, some days, she would rock gently in her old wicker chair. Other days, she would simply sit still, as if listening for someone she missed, or someone she knew was still speaking, but only in quiet hours. There was a worn Bible on the table beside her, the leather curled with years of rain and breath, and inside notes, little whispers scribbled in the margins. Hold me, Lord. Thank you for the rain. I'm scared today. You're still here. Elaine did not say much out loud anymore, not because she had nothing to say, but because the deeper things, the soul-sized truths, they speak best when our mouths fall still. Take a deep breath. Rest here for a moment. The first time she sat on the porch alone was the spring her husband went home. He had been gentle. He always had been. He passed just before the cherry blossoms returned, before the yard knew how to laugh again in pink and white. And so, for that first year, Elaine sat in silence with her tea. She did not ask for signs, but she noticed when the bird stayed longer on the railing, when the wind curled just once more around her shoulders, when the sun warmed her ankles through the hem of her dress. "It's you," she would whisper, a phrase so short it could slip past anyone, but not him, never him. Jesus, the companion of the grieving. Jesus, the one who sits beside the empty chair. Jesus, who never rushes a heart that needs time. You are not alone. God is near. Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Matthew 11:28. Elaine had come to understand something over time. Grief didn't move on like the seasons. It lingered softly, like dust caught in a beam of light, always present, though not always seen. The house had learned to breathe differently. There was a hush in the hallway now, a gentle silence that wrapped itself around her ankles when she walked. The floor creaked more kindly. Even the kettle took its time to whistle. The rooms hadn't changed, but the way the light fell onto the old floorboards felt different without another pair of footsteps to stir the shadows into motion. Elaine began rising earlier, not because she was restless, but because dawn felt like a friend now, a sacred visitor. She would boil water for tea, wrap herself in the same shawl her mother had knitted long ago, and step barefoot onto the porch. Sometimes her breath fogged in the cool morning air. Other times, the birds beat her to the sky. But always, always, there was God, not in flashes of thunder, but in the warmth of the mug between her hands, in the stillness of the trees before the wind stirred, in the memory of her husband's voice not gone, just resting beneath the silence. Take a deep breath. Rest here for a moment. On the third Tuesday of April, Elaine noticed something strange. She had placed her tea down beside her Bible as usual, but when she opened to the Psalms, there was a feather, small, pale, soft as sleep tucked between the pages. She smiled. No fear, only knowing. Under his wings, she murmured. There had been feathers before. One on the garden bench last autumn. Another caught in the window screen last summer. But this one was different, placed so gently, so precisely, right in Psalm 91, the place she'd been reading to her husband in his final days. He will cover you with his feathers. And she felt it then, a warmth behind her. No footsteps, just presence. No sound, just the fullness of being seen. Elaine closed her eyes, not in exhaustion, but in peace. She didn't need to understand everything. She just needed to remember she was not forgotten. And she was not alone. You are seen. You are held. You are safe beneath his wings. The Lord is near to the brokenhearted and saves the crushed in spirit. Psalm 34:18. It was a gentle kind of rain, the kind that did not rush the day. It came like a lullaby, brushing softly against the old tin roof, whispering as it passed through the tall pine branches just beyond the porch. Elaine had always loved the sound of rain, especially in the quiet hours. There was something sacred about it, as though the heavens themselves knew how to weep and rest all at once. She wrapped her hands around a warm bowl of soup and let the steam rise toward her tired face. There were no visitors today, no mail to read, no phone calls to return, just the steady rhythm of rain and the soft ache of memories. She rocked slowly in her chair, the creak of the wicker matching the hush of the wind. The house seemed smaller on days like this, not lonely, just simplified, like everything unnecessary had been gently set aside. The feather still lay tucked in her Bible. She hadn't moved it. She hadn't needed to. Some comforts don't need to be rearranged. They simply rest where they land. Take a deep breath. Rest here for a moment. Elaine leaned her head back and closed her eyes. She could almost hear his footsteps in the hallway, almost feel his calloused hand on her shoulder. almost smell the faint scent of cedar and peppermint that always lingered when he came in from the woods. She didn't weep. Not anymore. The ache had softened into something like reverence, a quiet knowing that love, once given, never really left. It folded itself into the corners of the house, the rain on the roof, the birds at the feeder. She had started talking aloud to Jesus more often these days. Not long prayers, just simple things. Thank you for the rain, or please stay close, or even, I don't know what I feel today, but I trust. You know, she didn't need answers. She just needed nearness. And nearness, he always gave. The longer she lived, the more she believed that God didn't shout. He didn't need to. He came softly in rain, in rest, in the fragile beauty of another morning on earth. And somehow, even in her solitude, Elaine felt accompanied, not by people though she missed them, but by presence, the kind that never leaves, the kind that sits beside you when everyone else has gone to sleep. You are not forgotten. God remembers you. He remembers your quiet tears, your weary hands, the long days when no one calls, the nights when you pray without words. He remembers, and He is here. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup overflows. Psalm 23:5. The mug was chipped, just a little, right along the rim where the glaze had worn thin from years of use. But Elaine never replaced it. There was something about that cup, something honest. It had held so many mornings, so many tears, so many quiet sips when the day was too heavy for anything else. She used to drink coffee. Now it was mostly tea. Something gentler, something that didn't push so hard. Every morning she filled it, sometimes with chamomile, sometimes cinnamon apple, and on days that felt long before they even began, just hot water with lemon and honey. She would cradle the cup in both hands and feel the warmth work its way into her skin. That warmth, she often thought, felt like God, not loud, not urgent, but kind and present. Take a deep breath. Rest here for a moment. One morning in May, Elaine sat a little longer than usual. The trees were in full bloom, not with flowers, but with green. The kind of green that only comes when the earth has forgiven winter and dared to begin again. She watched the wind lift the leaves and brush across the field like the hand of a friend. She closed her eyes and whispered, "Thank you for staying." She hadn't meant to say it out loud, but sometimes gratitude doesn't wait for ceremony. It just slips out, like breath, like prayer. There was a stillness that followed, but not the empty kind. It was the fullness kind, the kind where nothing needs to be spoken, where everything has already been understood. Her cup sat on the little table beside her, half full, still warm. She looked at it and smiled. It didn't matter how much was in the cup. What mattered was this: it was always enough. even when her strength wasn't much, even when her days felt slower than before, even when friends had grown quiet and birthdays had come and gone without cards. Still, the cup was enough. Still, God was enough. She remembered what the old psalm had said, the one she used to read every evening at her husband's bedside. You anoint my head with oil, my cup overflows. Overflowing didn't always mean abundance in the way the world spoke of it. It didn't mean riches or crowds or noise. It meant peace, right where she was, with what she had, with who she had. You don't need to be strong tonight. You don't need to have answers. You don't need to know the plan. You only need to be here and let Him hold the cup. Your life is not empty. It is held, and it is full in ways that only heaven can measure. I have loved you with an everlasting love. I have drawn you with unfailing kindness. Jeremiah 31:3. There was an old drawer in the hallway chest. It stuck when you opened it just a little. The wood had swollen with time, but Elaine never forced it. She would pull gently, tilt the drawer just so, and it would slide open with a sigh, like something being remembered. Inside were letters, so many letters, tied with ribbon, stacked in gentle disorder. Some were from her husband, written long ago, when he still signed with little hearts and called her darling in that boyish handwriting she could never quite replicate. Some were from friends, now gone. Some were from her daughter during her first year at college, scribbled with homesickness and joy. And some were never sent letters Elaine had written in her own moments of stillness. Little prayers folded into envelopes, addressed simply to Jesus on a hard day, to the one who knows my thoughts, to God who listens at night. She didn't write to be clever. She wrote because the act itself felt like sitting beside someone. Take a deep breath. Rest here for a moment. That afternoon, the light came through the hallway window like liquid gold, soft, forgiving light. Elaine knelt before the drawer, her knees cracking a little now. She smiled at the familiar sound. Nothing worked quite like it used to, but everything still worked just enough. She untied the ribbon on the oldest stack. The paper had thinned, edges curling, but the ink still whispered stories, the kind you don't read out loud, the kind that live in the space between memory and grace. One letter caught her eye, written after her first miscarriage. Years before her daughter was born, she had forgotten she kept it. Her own handwriting trembled on the page. Lord, I don't know how to be brave, but I'll keep breathing if you'll stay close. She sat with it in her lap, tears not falling, just resting in her eyes. The pain wasn't sharp anymore. It was softened, tender. God had not erased those wounds, but He had held them, wrapped them in mercy, carried her through every year that followed. The letter felt like a monument, now a testament that she had survived, that love had grown again, that Jesus had kept his word. You are still held, even in what you lost. You are not forgotten, even in the things you never spoke aloud. The drawer closed slowly, not with finality, but with peace. There were still letters to write, still moments to remember, still mornings ahead where Jesus would meet her on the porch, in the light, in the stillness between two heartbeats. Even now he was here, and that was enough. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. John 1:5. There was a small oil lamp on the side table beside Elaine's bed. It had belonged to her grandmother, and then her mother. And now it stood quietly at her bedside, a faithful sentinel against the dark. Elaine rarely used it now. There was electric light, of course, but something about the old lamp made her feel accompanied when she lit it, especially on stormy nights or when sleep wouldn't come. The room felt warmer, not in temperature, but in spirit. The flame danced gently behind the glass. A flicker, a reminder. Even in the dark, something still shines. Take a deep breath. Rest here for a moment. Kim, one night in June, Elaine awoke in the early hours. She hadn't meant to, but something stirred her, a whisper of movement in her chest, like a soul that remembered something before the body did. The house was silent, except for the ticking clock in the kitchen and the rustle of wind against the screen. She sat up slowly. Her knees ached more these days, but she didn't mind. Pain reminded her that she was still here, still journeying. She reached for the old lamp, poured a few drops of oil from the small bottle beside it, and struck a match. The wick caught gently, as if eager to be useful again. The room filled with golden quiet. No shadows dared draw near, only the soft glow of something steady, something true. Elaine sat back against her pillow, watching the light, letting it wash over the edges of her heart. She thought about the many nights she had sat in this room, waiting on news, praying through tears, watching the moon trace slow arcs across the ceiling, and how the light never failed to find her, not always quickly, not always dramatically, but always, eventually, the light came. It reminded her of Jesus, not the stained glass Jesus from childhood pictures, but the real one, the one who stayed up with you when no one else knew you were hurting, the one who walked beside you in empty parking lots, stood with you beside caskets, held you quietly when the world had no words. He was the flame in the dark, the warmth in the room, the stillness that carried peace. She remembered the scripture. The light shines in the darkness. Yes, it does. It always does. And not once, not ever, has the darkness been able to put it out. Even now, decades into widowhood, with fewer phone calls, fewer names left in her address book, Elaine's heart glowed with something fierce and kind hope. Hope is not loud. It does not shout. It flickers and then endures. You are not alone in the night. The light still burns, and Jesus is still here, watching, waiting, whispering, "I never left. Those who sow with tears will reap with songs of joy." Psalm 126, 5. The garden had grown wild in places, not unruly, just free. Elaine liked it that way. She never believed that every petal had to be perfect, every row measured. Life wasn't a straight line, and neither was beauty. The lilies came early that year, tall, white, proud. They bloomed by the back fence where the soil stayed soft and cool. The roses were slower, a little hesitant, but faithful. And in the corner by the shed, the irises, deep purple like velvet at dusk. Elaine walked the path slowly now, barefoot when the ground allowed. There was something holy about feeling the earth, about letting your steps fall where roots remember you. The garden, she believed, remembered her. It had known her laugh. It had known her tears. It had heard the whispered prayers she could never bring herself to say aloud inside the house. Take a deep breath. Rest here for a moment. Years ago, when her daughter was small, Elaine had taught her how to plant seeds. You don't have to see it grow, she told her gently. You just have to trust what's happening beneath the dirt. Her daughter, now grown, now living states away, had remembered those words once in a birthday card. Thank you for teaching me to believe in hidden things, Mom. Elaine smiled when she reread it. She kept that card inside her recipe book, a place she knew she'd return to often. Now, in the quiet of her older years, the garden felt less like a hobby and more like a chapel. She knelt slowly by the peonies, pressing her palms to the soil. It was warm. It held stories. It received her. There were mornings when she would speak softly to the wind brushing through the mint leaves, or to the bees buzzing with their tiny, earnest wings, or to the petals that unfolded without anxiety. Lord, thank you for what grows unseen. She understood now that most of life's beauty was hidden before it bloomed, and that most of God's goodness was doing its work in places we couldn't always see. The garden reminded her that patience was not passive, it was trusting, and trust was holy. Some of her friends had stopped planting. They said it was too much work for their age, but Elaine, she still planted, not because she needed the blossoms, but because she believed in the promise that what is buried in love will rise again in joy. You don't have to rush the growing. You don't have to fix what's unfinished. You just have to be faithful with what's in your hands and trust that God is faithful with what's beneath the surface. Are not 2 sparrows sold for a penny? Yet not one of them will fall to the ground outside your Father's care. So do not be afraid. You are worth more than many sparrows. Matthew 10 29, 31. It was a small thing, easily missed, but Elaine noticed it. That morning, as she settled onto the porch with her tea, a sparrow landed on the railing. Not unusual. Sparrows came often tiny, trembling things with hearts that beat like hummingbird wings. But this one didn't fly off. Not quickly, not nervously. It stayed. Elaine watched as it tilted its head from side to side, as if studying her face. Its feathers ruffled softly in the breeze, and for a long, gentle moment, they just sat together, an old woman and a little brown bird. No rush, no reason, just presence. Take a deep breath. Rest here for a moment. Stir. She thought of the verse one she had underlined so long ago. The ink had faded. Not one of them falls without the Father noticing. She had believed that Scripture since she was a girl. But today, sitting quietly with the sparrow, she felt it. The knowing, the being seen, not in grand ways, not in crowds or applause, but here in stillness, in the way this bird didn't need to flee, in the way creation itself seemed to trust her quiet heart. Elaine had spent many years worrying she was becoming invisible. After retirement, after widowhood, after birthdays slowed and old friends stopped calling regularly, she still received Christmas cards. But the handwriting had changed, children signing for parents who no longer remembered who she was. It was a quiet kind of fading, not painful, just hollow. But then a sparrow, and a silence that said, "You are not forgotten. You are never out of the Father's gaze. You are never too old, too quiet, too overlooked for the love of the one who notices sparrows and counts every white hair on your head." The bird finally fluttered its wings, then took flight, curving up and over the porch railing toward the orchard behind the house. Elaine smiled, her hands folded around her cup. She didn't need anyone to call today. She didn't need a special occasion. She had been visited. She had been seen. And somewhere deep in her bones, deeper than loneliness could ever reach, she knew God still sent reminders. God still stayed near, even in the smallest of ways, even in a single sparrow on a quiet Tuesday morning. You are not too small. You are not too late. You are known. You are noticed. You are loved. The Lord your God is with you, the mighty warrior who saves. He will take great delight in you. In his love, he will no longer rebuke you, but will rejoice over you with singing. Zephaniah 3:17. Elaine had never considered herself a singer, not in the usual sense. She'd hummed to her daughter when she was small, murmured lullabies that had no real words, just melodies soft enough to coax sleep into tiny limbs. She'd harmonized quietly during Sunday hymns, but only when others were singing louder. She liked the way the voices rose around her, a woven net of praise that didn't need solos. But lately, as the house grew quieter with each season, Elaine found herself singing more often, not to impress, not even to remember, but to stay company with the silence. It wasn't always out loud. Sometimes it was just inside her, a hum in the soul, a song without a melody, only feeling. Take a deep breath. Rest here for a moment. One evening, just before the sky turned lavender and dusk laid its hush over the earth, Elaine sat by the kitchen window, She had opened the screen to let the breeze move freely through the house. The curtain billowed gently, like a breath from God, and somewhere inside her a sound stirred. She began to sing, very softly, a hymn her mother used to sing when the nights were long. Jesus, Savior, pilot me over life's tempestuous sea. Her voice cracked a little age, an emotion twisting gently around the melody. But she didn't stop, not this time. She kept singing, line after line, verse after verse. She forgot the kettle. She forgot the time. She forgot to be self-conscious, because something was happening, something sacred. She could feel him listening, not like an audience, not like a judge, like a friend who had waited a long time to hear that sound again. When she finished, there was a stillness so full, so weighty with peace, that tears welled up in her eyes without effort. She had not performed. She had offered the small sound inside her, fragile, wavering, but hers, and in return, she felt the hush of heaven itself lean close. You are my delight, the Spirit whispered, though no words passed through the air. You've always been my song. Elaine pressed her fingers to her chest, as if to keep the echo from escaping too soon. She hadn't realized until that moment how long she had longed to be sung over, to be the one the Lord rejoices in. Not for anything grand she'd done, but simply because she was his. You don't have to sing perfectly. You only have to open your heart, and the God who formed the music of the stars will sing back to you. In your silence, in your sighs, in the deepest part of your soul, where the sorrow settles and the joy still stirs, you are his song. You are not forgotten. You are cherished in melody. Even to your old age and grey hairs, I am he. I am he who will sustain you. I have made you and I will carry you. I will sustain you and I will rescue you. Isaiah 46:4. There was a blanket folded at the edge of Elaine's bed. Soft, worn, stitched with love by her sister many years ago. The edges were fraying now. One small corner had come undone, a thread curling like a question mark. But Elaine never mended it. She liked it that way. It reminded her that love did not have to be flawless to last. She unfolded it gently each evening, even in the warmer months, just to feel its familiar weight across her legs. It didn't do much against cold, but that wasn't the point. It carried memory. It held comfort. It was enough. Take a deep breath. Rest here for a moment. That night, Elaine sat on the edge of the bed a long while before lying down. Her knees were aching again, the kind of ache that didn't ask permission, just settled in like a quiet tenant. She reached for the blanket, but then paused. Something tugged at her heart, a gentle stirring. She turned slightly and looked around the room, walls painted in soft tones, a lamp glowing low, a small wooden cross above the door. This was the room where she had laughed and wept, read letters and journals, prayed over names, and whispered goodbyes. And still, Jesus had remained. Through all of it, she reached for her Bible, opened to Isaiah 46, and traced her finger across the page where the promise lived, "I will carry you." She whispered it out loud, "I will carry you." Not, "You must carry yourself." Not, "You must figure it all out." Not, "You must stay strong." But "I will carry you." And in that moment, the blanket became something more. Not just fabric, not just comfort. A symbol of being held, of being loved, even as time unravels edges and days grow slower. Elaine wrapped it around her shoulders. Her back curved gently now with age, but her heart straightened upright, full, seen. You don't need to be enough on your own. You have a God who wraps himself around you like warmth, like presence, like a promise made before you were born and never once broken. Let him carry you tonight. Let him cover you. You've done enough. You've come far. Now rest and know he is near. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Psalm 23:6. The house had 2 porches, one for the morning where the sun greeted you with open arms, and one for the evening where the shadows stretched long and the light softened into gold. But it was the west-facing window that Elaine loved most in the final hours of the day. It framed the pasture and the hills beyond it, those quiet, faithful hills that had watched her grow old without ever saying a word. There was a chair there, not much to look at, just oak and cushion, but it had molded itself to her shape over the years. It knew her. It knew the way she sat when she was joyful, the way she leaned forward in prayer, the way her head tilted slightly when she was remembering something too precious to say aloud. Take a deep breath. Rest here for a moment. Look on this evening. Elaine sat with her feet tucked beneath her, a blanket over her lap, and the sun spilling golden orange across the floor. The fields outside glowed like honey. She watched as a single deer moved slowly along the edge of the trees, not afraid, just wandering. A memory stirred. Her husband, on their 3rd anniversary, had brought her to this very spot in the house and whispered, "This is where we'll grow old together." And they had, mostly. He was gone now, but somehow he wasn't. The house carried his silence, not in absence, but in peace. Elaine reached for her Bible again, rested it on her knees, and turned to the psalm she knew by heart. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me. Yes, they had. Goodness in the laughter, mercy in the loss, goodness in the garden, mercy in the waiting, goodness in her daughter's voice on the phone, mercy in the quiet days with no one to talk to. Goodness and mercy had followed her like shadow and sunlight, always there, sometimes unseen, but always close. She whispered aloud, "I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever." It didn't feel far away, heaven. Not anymore. It felt like it had already begun here, in this room, in this light, in this deep, steady companionship that had never let her go. You are not drifting. You are being led, even in the stillness, even in the fading light. You are not forgotten. You are not behind. You are exactly where He walks with you. Mercy is beside you. Goodness is behind you. And Jesus is waiting at the window, watching the sun go down with you, saying softly, "You're almost home. Peace I leave with you. My peace I give you. I do not give to you as the world gives. Do not let your hearts be troubled, and do not be afraid." John 14:27. There was a hush in the house that night. Not emptiness, not loneliness, just hush. Like a chapel after the last candle's been snuffed. Like a breath held in reverence. Like the world waiting for something beautiful to arrive quietly, without fanfare. Elaine had brushed her teeth, washed her face, warmed her tea. The day had passed without anything unusual. No visitor, no storm, no remarkable phone call. Just stillness. She stood at the threshold of her bedroom, holding the edge of the door frame, her fingers resting against the wood like she was remembering a dance. She looked inside at the bed turned down, the lamp softly glowing, the old quilt ready to receive her one more time. But she didn't step in just yet. Take a deep breath. Rest here for a moment. Mont. Her eyes moved gently over the familiar room. There was the framed picture of her wedding day, black and white, creased at the corners. His smile still made her heart rise. There was the prayer her granddaughter had written in shaky second-grade print, taped above the dresser. "Dear God, please help Grandma. Feel your hug." Elaine had never taken it down. It felt like an answered prayer that never stopped answering. And in the far corner, next to the window, her small writing desk, a place where her hands had scribbled prayers, opened Bibles, and written Christmas cards long after her joints stiffened and her eyesight dimmed. But tonight, there was nothing left to write, nothing left to sort, nothing left to prove, only peace, the kind that doesn't come from circumstances, the kind that arrives when your soul has seen enough of the world to know it never had to earn God's love. Elaine stepped inside slowly, tenderly, like walking into a place already filled with presence. She pulled the blanket up to her chest, laid her head on the pillow just the way she had for so many years, and then with a sigh deeper than words, she whispered, "Jesus, if you're near, you can sit with me a while." She didn't hear a voice. She didn't need to. The hush was enough. The warmth that settled on her chest, the sense that someone had already been waiting in the room, not to take her, not to rush her, but to be with her in this final hour of the day. You do not need to be brave right now. You do not need to be strong. You need only to rest, because peace himself is in the room, and he has come not to frighten, but to stay, not to question, but to comfort. He brings no burden, He brings no fear, only presence, only love, only arms wide enough to carry every ache into morning. For now we see only a reflection, as in a mirror. Then we shall see face to face. Now I know in part, then I shall know fully, even as I am fully known. 1 Corinthians 13:12. Elaine didn't know when she fell asleep. The way some nights just hush you so gently. You don't remember the moment you surrendered to rest. There were no dreams. Not at first, just quiet. And then a light. Not the kind that shines from a lamp or drips in through the window, but a soft, golden presence that seemed to rise from within her as much as it came from beyond her. She found herself standing, though her body was far away now. Lightness filled her limbs. Her breath felt new, like she'd just been born again into some slower, sweeter air. She was not confused, not afraid, only aware that something sacred was unfolding. Take a deep breath. Rest here for a moment. Ahead of her, a figure, not distant, but veiled, as if heaven itself shimmered between them, like a curtain woven with stars. And then the figure stepped closer. No trumpet, no thunder, just presence. Elaine knew. She didn't question, didn't analyze. She only knew. The way a child knows their mother's hand even with eyes closed. The way a heart recognizes its maker without needing to speak. Jesus. He was there. He was real. He had always been real. But now, she saw him. He smiled. Not with grandeur, but with deep, eternal kindness. The kind that says, I know you. I remember every moment, even the ones you forgot. He reached out his hand, and when she took it, the years fell away. Not lost, but fulfilled. Every ache in her knees, every tear she cried alone, every letter in the drawer, every quiet song, every lonely dinner, every whispered prayer, all of it gathered in the palm of his hand. You've come so far, he said, though his lips did not move. I carried you more than you knew. Elaine wept, but the tears did not sting. They were like warm rain falling into a garden that had waited its whole life to bloom. And then he whispered right into the marrow of her soul. You are fully known now and fully loved. You have come home. You do not need to understand everything. You are not lost. You are not late. He sees you. He has always seen you. And in his hands, nothing is wasted. And God shall wipe away all tears from their eyes. And there shall be no more death, neither sorrow nor crying. Neither shall there be any more pain, for the former things are passed away. Revelation 21:4. It felt like morning, but not like any morning Elaine had ever known. There was light, but it did not come from a sun. There was warmth, but no shadows followed it. And the air, the air was full of music, though no instrument played. It was joy, rising and resting with every breath. It was praise, woven into the silence. It was peace as if the whole atmosphere breathed in harmony with the heart of God. Elaine stood in a garden, not hers, but somehow hers. The lilies were there, the roses, the irises, but brighter, fuller, as though every petal had waited its whole life to be this alive. She looked down at her hands. They were smooth, strong, unburdened. And then a voice, not from behind, not from beside. It came from everywhere and yet settled in her heart like a lullaby remembered from childhood. Welcome home. Take a deep breath. Rest here for a moment. He's talking. There were people in the distance, not crowds, not a noise, just presence. Familiar, though she hadn't seen some of them in decades. Her husband stood among them. Not younger, not older, just whole. His smile had not changed. He didn't rush to her, just opened his arms and waited. The way love always waits without fear of time. She stepped toward him, and as they embraced, she felt it, the fullness. Not happiness like the world gives, but joy, complete, total, unbreakable. And Jesus was there, not hovering above, but walking among them, laughing, holding, listening, leading. His robe caught the golden light like a flame, but his eyes held all the sorrows she had ever known and had healed them with just a glance. Elaine turned once more, looked over her shoulder toward the house on the hill, the porch that faced the dawn, the chair by the window. She smiled, not in sadness, but in gratitude. That life had been holy, even in its plainness. That God had been with her in every moment, the tea, the feathers, the letters, the rain. All of it had pointed here. And now, morning had come, the kind of morning that never ends, that never grows tired, that never slips into night. You are home now, not because you earned it, not because you made it through without falling, but because love carried you, and love never lets go. You can rest now. You can sing now. You can walk freely with no pain in your knees, no sorrow in your chest. You are in His presence, and His presence is forever. Final whispered reflection. You are not forgotten. You are not alone. Every quiet step of your life was watched, loved, carried. He is the porch at dawn, the lamp at night, the hand in the dark, the voice that sings over your silence. Let Him hold you now. Let morning come. Let peace lead you gently into sleep and into the arms of the one who has loved you from the very beginning. Amen. Stay here a little longer. Don't rush ahead. The Lord is still speaking, just softly. Let's keep walking this quiet path with Him. The Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear? The Lord is the stronghold of my life. Of whom shall I be afraid? Psalm 27:1. There was a small room at the back of the house. Not a room for visitors. Not a room to show off. It had one window, a wooden desk, a faded blue armchair, and a lamp that had not been turned off in years. not because it could not be, but because it must not be. Elaine, who had lived alone since her husband passed nearly 12 years ago, kept it burning like a promise, a soft reminder that light still belonged in her world, even if laughter had grown quieter and the calendar no longer held many appointments. Every evening, just before 7, Elaine would walk slowly into that little room. She'd sit in the chair, open her Bible, and listen, not for voices, not for signs, just for presence. Take a deep breath. Rest here for a moment. Thump. The lamp was old, the kind with a linen shade and a brass pull chain that clicked softly when touched. Elaine had pulled that chain every evening for decades. First, when the children were small and needed nighttime stories. Then, when her husband read the scriptures aloud beside her. And now, in this long season of stillness, she pulled it for herself. And maybe, just maybe, for Jesus. She liked to think he noticed the little things, the turned down blanket, the song she hummed while folding towels, the way she still set 2 teacups on the tray, even if only one would be used. Tonight, as she sat beneath the glow of that quiet lamp, Elaine read slowly from the Psalms, just a few verses at a time. Her hands trembled more now. The pages turned like whispers. "The Lord is my light," she read aloud, "and my salvation." She paused. How many times had she read this verse? Hundreds, thousands. But tonight, it settled differently. Like the words had been waiting all these years for her to slow down enough to finally receive them. The Lord is my light. Not just long ago, not just when things made sense, but now, here, in this small, forgotten room where grief still curled at the edges and the air held the scent of lavender and old books. You don't have to be strong tonight. You don't have to have it all figured out. You only have to sit in the light. Let him be the flame. Let him be the shelter. Let him be the one who stays when the rest of the world has gone quiet. You are not forgotten. You are not too late. You are not too weary to be loved. You are seen by the one who keeps the lamp burning when your own flame feels low. You will keep in perfect peace those whose minds are steadfast because they trust in you. Isaiah 26:3. In Elaine's kitchen, there was a table that no longer followed the clock. She had removed it years ago. The old wall clock had ticked so loudly, always reminding her when to go, when to do, when to be something more. But she didn't need that rhythm anymore. She was learning a slower one, the rhythm of grace. Now, the table simply waited for tea, for bread, for silence. Some days, it held her Bible and the spoon. Other days, a napkin and her folded hands. And sometimes it held only sunlight, slanting through the lace curtain, resting gently on the grain of the wood, like a quiet guest who had come just to sit with her a while. Take a deep breath. Rest here for a moment. Elaine prepared tea this morning, lemon balm. She moved slower now, but every gesture felt more sacred. The turning of the kettle knob, the lifting of the ceramic cup, the tiny clink of a silver spoon resting in its saucer. Each sound belonged in the sanctuary of her morning. She sat down at the table, not to rush, not to plan, but to be. The house didn't expect anything of her anymore. No appointments, no deadlines, only presence. She closed her eyes, the warm cup in her hands. A sigh released like incense. "Lord," she whispered, "I don't always know how to pray anymore, but I know how to sit with you." And he was there, not with thunder, not with visions, but with nearness. Elaine had come to understand something in these quiet years. Peace wasn't something you chased. It was something you noticed. It lived in small places, in steam rising from tea, in birdsong over the garden wall, in the memory of someone you still love even after they've gone home. And it lived right here, in a kitchen with no clock, where an old woman sat with a cup in her hand and a savior at her table. "You will keep in perfect peace." She remembered the scripture. Yes, peace is kept, held gently, not forced, not earned. It's given by Him again and again. You don't have to hurry. You don't have to achieve. You don't have to go anywhere tonight. The table is set. The tea is warm, and God is already here. Just stay. Peace is near. Even when I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. Psalm 23:4. The coat still hung there. Second hook from the left, the brown wool one, the one that had belonged to her husband, Harold. Elaine never moved it, never packed it away, never dusted it too harshly. Some days she would brush her fingertips across the sleeve, not to remember, but to remain, to stay close to something that had once walked beside her through snow, through spring, through years too full and years too thin. The coat didn't smell like him anymore, but it still held his shape, like an old song holds the voice of someone you miss. Take a deep breath. Rest here for a moment. There were visitors once, kind neighbors who gently suggested she let it go, move on, make space. But Elaine never understood that phrase. What is space, if not the room we make for what matters? The coat stayed. Because love had lived in it. Because she still prayed by it. Because sometimes, when the wind blew hard across the porch, she'd find herself talking aloud to it. Guess what the Lord showed me today? Love, she whispered one stormy evening, her hands folded around a letter she'd just finished writing. No answer came, and yet the silence was not empty. It was full of presence, full of memories that had become soft instead of sharp. And sometimes, when the ache came uninvited, when the nights grew long and the world shrank to the sound of ticking and breathing, Elaine would take the coat and lay it across the armchair, not out of grief, but because she still believed in making space for love to stay. She had once read the verse, Even though I walk through the valley, yes, she had walked through it, not rushed, not leapt, but walked, slow and steady, and she was never alone. Even in the days when Harold left, when the rooms felt too quiet, when the ache showed up in the middle of soup making, Jesus had been there, not removing the shadow, but walking with her through it. You don't have to erase what hurts in order to heal. God does not ask you to forget. He simply promises to remember with you and to stay. He doesn't leave when the room goes quiet. He doesn't pull away when the memories are too loud. He hangs his comfort right next to the ache, like a coat, ready whenever you need to feel warmth again. You are not walking alone. You never were. Even now he walks beside you, gentle, steady, true. Your word is a lamp to my feet and a light to my path. Psalm 119, 105. It had begun to do it on its own. Her Bible creased, soft-edged, ink-stained with tiny notes in the margins, would fall open to the same page every time. Isaiah 43. It didn't matter where she had left her bookmark. Somehow, the spine knew. The page fluttered like wings settling and stopped always in the same place. She didn't resist it anymore. She took it as a kindness, as if the word itself knew where she needed to return, again and again. Do not fear, for I have redeemed you. I have called you by name. You are mine. Take a deep breath. Rest here for a moment. There. Elaine ran her fingers gently along the lines. She didn't underline them, not anymore. They were already written in her heart. She remembered reading those verses after her diagnosis. Years ago, a small lump, a surgery, a fear that stayed longer than expected. I have called you by name. It echoed in her ribs when she couldn't sleep at night. She remembered reading them when her daughter went through the divorce. Elaine didn't know how to help. She didn't know how to fix it, but she read that chapter out loud every morning for a month. Her voice cracked, but the promise did not. You are mine. That sentence, 3 words, had become her anchor. Not you must be strong. Not you must be useful. Just, you are mine. It didn't depend on her mood, or her memory, or her mistakes. It was identity, spoken by a father who never misplaced what he loved. Some days, Elaine would place her hand flat on the open page and say nothing. Just breathe and let the truth settle deeper than any worry could reach. She didn't need all the answers. She didn't need all the plans. She just needed to know who she was. And she did. You don't have to open 100 pages to find what your soul needs. Sometimes, God brings you back to the same verse, the same truth, because it still has more to give. You are His. Still, always. When your thoughts race, when your breath shortens, when your bones ache with waiting, you are still His. And that is enough. Let the page stay open. Let the word speak again and again and again. Because love is not tired of finding you. And God is not tired of reminding you who you are. The wind blows where it wishes. You hear its sound, but you do not know where it comes from or where it is going. So it is with everyone born of the Spirit. John 3:8. It was late afternoon, the kind of light that turns the trees golden and makes everything feel like it belongs to something eternal. Elaine had stepped outside without her shawl. She hadn't planned to stay long, but the air was gentle that day, and the wind felt familiar. Not cold, not sharp, but warm, brushing softly across her cheek like a hand from a memory that had never quite let go. She stood still on the back porch, her hands resting on the wooden rail. A few leaves scuttled across the grass. The bird bath shimmered beneath a line of late sun. And then the wind rose again. Not hard, not wild, just purposeful, as if it knew she was there, as if it had come only for her. Take a deep breath. Rest here for a moment. Elaine closed her eyes, and for a brief, sacred moment, she imagined the wind as the breath of God. Not metaphor, not poetry, but real. His nearness in motion, his spirit in movement, a whisper of his presence touching her skin and reminding her, I'm still here. She had always loved the wind. As a girl, she'd run with her arms outstretched, pretending to fly. As a mother, she'd watched her daughter chase butterflies under these same trees. As a widow, the wind had become her companion, sitting with her when the house grew too quiet and the ache too loud. Some people looked for signs in thunder. Elaine had learned to find God in the gentle rush of air through the pines. And this afternoon, the wind stayed with her, longer than usual. It lifted a corner of her collar. It tangled lightly in her hair. It danced across her garden like a spirit, remembering where it had once walked with her through rows of zinnias and prayer. You haven't forgotten me, Elaine whispered, tears touching the edge of her voice. She didn't need proof. She didn't need theology. She just needed that wind, that warmth, that presence that wrapped around her shoulders like a hymn. You don't have to see him to know he's close. You don't have to understand the mystery to feel the comfort. The Spirit moves where it will, but it never loses you. Not once. Not in all these years. Even now he moves around you, like wind through open windows, like breath on quiet skin, like grace without explanation. He knows your name, and he comes close just to remind you that you are still held. The spirit of man is the candle of the Lord, searching all the inward parts of the belly. Proverbs 20:27, KJV. Elaine had a shelf beside the fireplace, not for decorations, not for show, just candles, 7 of them, each one a different shape, a different color, a different memory. One was pale blue, a gift from her daughter after a winter visit, wrapped in ribbon that still lay beside it. One was ivory white, the kind used during Advent, with the word hope carved faintly into its side. One had never been lit, still new, still waiting, but the others, they had burned, melted, pooled in quiet hours when prayer felt more like a breath than a sentence. Elaine lit them slowly sometimes, not for light, but for remembering, for listening, for returning to the heart of things. Take a deep breath. Rest here for a moment. Connor, that evening, after the wind had left the porch and the shadows stretched long on the hardwood floor, Elaine walked to the shelf. She chose the soft lavender candle, the one she used when sleep was hard to find. With hands that trembled but did not fumble, she struck the match and touched flame to wick. It caught quickly, like it had been waiting. She carried it carefully to the kitchen table and set it down beside her open Bible. The light flickered, and the room grew quiet, not with absence, but with presence. She read aloud from Psalm 18, "You, O Lord, keep my lamp burning." She paused. She looked at the candle, a single flame, fragile and faithful. How many nights had it burned while she whispered names to heaven? How many times had it listened when no one else could? She did not need loud prayers. She did not need eloquent words. She only needed a flame and a Father who still saw her. The candle reminded her that the soul has its own language, quiet, flickering, but steady. Sometimes God speaks loud, but most often He speaks like this, in gentle light, in sacred stillness, in flame that holds space for sorrow and gratitude alike. You don't have to burn brightly. You don't have to shine for others. You only have to be willing to stay lit, even when the room feels dark, even when the days feel long. Your spirit, dear one, is a candle, and God walks gently around it, guarding the flame, tending the wick, delighting in your simple, steady light. He keeps it burning not because you are strong, but because He is near, and your ears shall hear a word behind you, saying, "This is the way, walk in it," when you turn to the right or when you turn to the left. Isaiah 30:21. Elaine had once walked miles each week, through town, through the market, through early spring mornings scented with lilac and laundry soap. She used to walk with purpose, a list in her pocket, a bag in hand, a plan in mind. But these days, her walks had changed. Now she walked slowly, without destination, with one hand resting lightly on the railing and the other carrying nothing but time. She no longer walked to get somewhere. She walked to be with God, to feel her breath match the rhythm of His nearness, to let her thoughts settle like leaves returning home to the ground. Take a deep breath. Rest here for a moment. No, there was a path behind the house, just a circle, a small loop near the apple trees, worn into the grass by years of quiet steps. Elaine walked it each day with her cane tapping gently beside her, not quickly, not far, but faithfully, one step, then another, and sometimes, in that gentle rhythm, she would whisper, "Thank you for still letting me move. Thank you for these old knees. Thank you for not being in a hurry. The walk never changed much, but her heart did. Because every lap, every slow, small loop became a kind of worship, a way of saying, I'm still here, Lord, and more importantly, a way of hearing him say, so am I. She remembered Isaiah's words, you will hear a voice behind you. Yes, that's what it felt like. Not a shout, not a sermon, just a whisper behind her, beside her, within her. This is the way. It seemed to say, keep walking, even slowly, even simply, I'm walking with you. Elaine had no great tasks to finish, no audience to impress, just her small shoes, her steady breath, and the joy of walking with a God who never cared how fast she went. You don't have to go far to be going somewhere, and you don't have to achieve to be deeply loved. Even a short walk in the back field can become sacred ground when your steps are laid in prayer and the Spirit walks at your side. You are not alone. Even now, he matches your pace. I praise you because I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Your works are wonderful. I know that full well. Psalm 139 von Hart and Tongue. The mirror in Elaine's bedroom was oval-shaped, its edges trimmed in a faded brass frame that once gleamed proudly, but now simply rested. She didn't look into it often anymore, not because she avoided herself, but because she no longer needed its permission. There were years when she'd stood before it anxiously, pressing down the lines around her eyes, adjusting sweaters to flatter what time had softened. But something had changed. Now when she looked, she didn't see a face to fix. She saw a life, a story, etched in gentle creases, told through the curve of her mouth, the slope of her shoulders, the silver in her hair. Take a deep breath. Rest here for a moment. Hear Ma. One afternoon, just before the sun began its golden descent, Elaine stood before the mirror once more. The light fell in through the window behind her, warming the floor and her back like the hand of God resting gently between her shoulder blades. She looked at her reflection, really looked, and instead of sighing, she smiled. Not wide, just softly, the way you smile at an old friend who has stayed with you through every sorrow and every joy. Her skin had grown thin, her eyes now watered in the wind, but her spirit had never been more alive. She raised a hand to her face, not to examine, but to bless. You've walked me through a lot, she whispered, voice tender and low. She thought of every hard season this reflection had witnessed, and still there was love here. Still there was goodness. And then, just below her breath, she repeated the words she once taught her daughter to memorize. I am fearfully and wonderfully made. She said it twice, then a third time until it didn't feel like a verse, but a truth written into her bones. This body, worn but sacred, had carried decades of faith. It had bent in prayer, held crying children, held trembling hands at hospital bedsides. It had stood for hymns, sat in waiting rooms, walked through grief, danced in kitchens, and now it stood still, held in mercy, bathed in light. Elaine no longer asked the mirror to make her younger. She no longer hoped it would hide her frailty. She only asked it to tell the truth, and it did. You are not broken. You are not behind. You are not past your beauty. You are still being written. You are still radiant with glory that the world cannot measure. And when the Lord sees you, He does not flinch. He does not compare. He calls you lovely, and He means it. Be still and know that I am God. I will be exalted among the nations. I will be exalted in the earth. Psalm 46:10. Elaine had always kept lists, not out of compulsion, but out of care. Grocery lists, prayer lists, to-do lists, little notepads stacked in a drawer by the stove, each page lined with the small tasks that held her days together like stitches in a well-loved quilt. Call Marjorie, buy more dish soap, pray for Anna's surgery, put out seed for the finches, water the violets in the window. These lists had helped her when grief blurred the days, when memory frayed, when loneliness curled up at the edge of morning. But today, she didn't finish her list. Take a deep breath. Rest here for a moment. It wasn't for lack of trying. The pen sat beside the pad, her handwriting still steady in the upper half of the page. But somewhere between boil eggs and write to Sarah, Elaine had paused. She looked out the kitchen window. The clouds moved slowly, casting long shadows on the back fence. And suddenly, the silence felt more important than the next thing to do. She set the pen down, made tea, sat by the window and watched the wind move through the pines. And she heard it not with ears, but with her spirit be still. It wasn't a scolding. It was an invitation, a loving nudge from the one who knew how hard she had tried to make her life useful. But usefulness, Elaine had learned, was not the same as belovedness. She didn't need to finish the list to be worthy of God's nearness. She didn't need to be productive to be at peace. The world had taught her to keep going, but grace whispered, "Stop here, breathe. This moment is enough." And so, she sat, not out of exhaustion, but out of worship, the kind that doesn't look like singing, but like surrender, like letting go of the need to prove you're doing enough or being enough. Elaine leaned her head against the wall. The tea grew lukewarm in her hands, but her heart warmed with something deeper, a knowing that God was near, right here, in this breath, in this quiet, in this unfinished page. You don't have to complete the list. You don't have to clean the whole house. You don't have to answer every letter or solve every question. You are not loved for what you accomplish. You are loved because you are His. Let the page stay open. Let the ink pause mid-sentence. Be still and know He is God and you are safe. Even if I settle on the far side of the sea, even there your hand will guide me. Your right hand will hold me fast. Psalm 139. 9 saw 10. That night was quiet, even quieter than usual. The wind had stilled. The clock in the kitchen had stopped ticking. A small storm had passed hours earlier, just enough to rinse the dust from the leaves and hush the earth. Elaine lay beneath her quilt, the old one with sunflowers stitched in a circle by her mother's hands. So many years ago, her fingers curled loosely over the blanket's edge. She could feel her heartbeat in her wrists, not fast, not weak, just steady. She closed her eyes and listened to the stillness. It was full tonight, full of something more than silence. Take a deep breath. Rest here for a moment. Except she did not feel afraid, only aware, like the veil between here and there had thinned somehow, as though heaven had drawn nearer, just for the evening, as though angels had leaned low, quiet in their wings, waiting not to take, but to keep company. Elaine's breath came slowly, deep and soft. She had said her prayers hours ago, but still, words moved through her soul like a lullaby from another world. "I'm not alone," she whispered into the hush. "You're here." No voice answered, but she didn't need one. Presence was enough. She remembered a verse from when she was young. "Even if I settle on the far side of the sea." She smiled faintly. Her breath caught, not in pain, but in peace. Yes, Lord, even there. She thought of her daughter grown now, strong and kind. She thought of Harold's old coat, of the feather once found in her Bible, of tea that went cold beside long prayers. And she thought of Jesus, the quiet companion who had walked with her from the laughter of her 20s through the losses of her 70s into this calm, sacred night. He had stayed through every season. He had stayed. She could feel it now, like light under her skin, like a promise about to unfold. Not fear, not ending, just arrival, as if heaven had opened its arms and said softly, "You are almost home." Elaine did not move. She didn't need to. Her body rested. Her soul listened. And in that holy pause, that breath between earth and glory, she knew God was holding her fast. You don't have to be afraid of the end, because in Him, the end is only the beginning. Even in your final breath, He is closer than you've ever known. And when the world fades from view, His hand will still be holding yours. You are not alone, not tonight, not ever. Because of the Lord's great love, we are not consumed, for His compassions never fail. They are new every morning. Great is your faithfulness. Lamentations 3:23. The sun rose gently, not like a trumpet, but like a lullaby continuing in a different key. It slipped across the windowsill of Elaine's room, resting on the wooden dresser, warming the floor by her bedside where her slippers still waited, right where she had left them the night before. The birds began to sing, not in a rush, not in chorus, but in patient notes like a sacred greeting whispered into the trees. The house was quiet, but not empty. Something holy lingered. The kind of stillness you feel after someone you love has spoken truth into the room and left it glowing. Take a deep breath. Rest here for a moment. Elaine did not rise that morning. Not in the way she always had. Her spirit had already risen, drawn upward by peace and light and the gentle hand of God. But the room still remembered her. The blanket still held her warmth. The tea kettle sat quietly on the stove, unboiled, and the Bible on the table opened still. To Isaiah 43 seemed to rest without worry. You are mine, it said, still whispering, still true. Later, her daughter would come. She would sit on the edge of the bed, her hands folded, her breath caught between love and loss. But even then, the room would remain calm, peaceful, because something of heaven had passed through it, and the air had not forgotten. In time, the chair by the window would stay empty. The candles would be dusted gently. The garden would bloom again, and someone would find the drawers filled with notes, with verses, with half-written letters that all ended the same way, still trusting. Elaine had not rushed through life. She had walked it slowly, faithfully, one gentle step at a time. And now she had crossed the threshold into mourning, the true mourning, the kind that never fades, the kind that never asks you to hurry because time no longer presses. There is no schedule in heaven, no clock, no worry that the hours might slip away. Only presence, only glory, only love. And in that great light, Elaine was not gone. She was fulfilled. Every seed she had planted in the dark, every prayer, every kindness, every quiet act of faith had bloomed into something eternal. You are not lost to time. You are not late to joy. And the morning that waits for you asks nothing but that you let him lead you there, gently, for his mercies are new, not only today, but forever. Great is his faithfulness, and great is the welcome that waits for you at the first light of heaven. And I heard a voice from heaven saying, "Write this, blessed are the dead who die in the Lord from now on." Yes, says the Spirit, they will rest from their labor, for their deeds will follow them. Revelation 14:13. There is a place the eye cannot see, not quite, but the heart feels it, the soul leans toward it, and if you are very quiet, very still, you might sense it, like a soft breath across the edge of your life. It's where the porch meets heaven, not a wooden one, though she loved that old house on the hill, not the one that faced the morning dew and heard her prayers whispered with trembling hands. This one is eternal, sun-warmed, sky-wrapped, with no shadows to fall and no time to count. Elaine sits there now, but not as she was, not weary, not alone, not waiting. She is clothed in light, wrapped in peace, held by joy so deep, it sings in her bones. The birds still come, but they never leave. They circle gently, drawn not to crumbs, but to the worship that rises like mist from this sacred place. Take a deep breath. Rest here for a moment. Here, sometimes, when her daughter walks the old path behind the house, she feels it a hush, a warmth on her shoulder, a breeze that carries a peace not of this world. And she smiles because she knows her mother is still near, not in body, but in light, in the goodness she taught, in the prayers she prayed, in the way she never needed applause to live a beautiful, holy life. Elaine's Bible is kept now on a little table beside her daughter's chair, still open to Isaiah 43, still whispering the promise. And when the evening falls soft and the tea is steeping and the world feels just a little too fragile, a voice rises in her daughter's spirit. I am with you, not just remembered, but present, because God does not bury saints. He welcomes them, and their lives continue in every place they once loved, every word they once prayed, every light they once kindled. Elaine is still walking, but now it's in the garden that never fades. She still tends beauty, but now with hands that never tire. She still listens, but now to the voice of Jesus, clear as wind on water. And every now and then, when someone lights a candle or sits in stillness or reads the same old verse again and again, she smiles because she knows the secret love does not end. It only becomes more real, more eternal, more alive. You don't need to see her to know she is well. You don't need to understand heaven to trust that she has found her place. She is with him now, and in him, she is with you still. You are not alone tonight. You are not forgotten. You are part of a story that never ends in the dark, but always, always ends in light. Final whispered reflection. Let the world fall quiet now. Let the noise slip away. You don't have to carry today into the night. He is here, and he is enough. You can rest. You can breathe. You can be still. The porch light is still on. The Spirit still whispers. And Jesus, gentle and steady, sits beside you. Sleep now, and remember, you are loved, you are held, you are his. Amen. Take a breath. You're doing just fine. You don't need to be anywhere else right now. Let the next chapter carry you gently deeper into his comfort. Even to your old age and grey hairs, I am he. I am he who will sustain you. I have made you and I will carry you. Isaiah 46:4. Her fingers had always held tightly to prayer, to habit, to the lives of those she loved. Her hands had once braided little girl hair in the quiet morning light, once folded neatly around her husband's trembling fingers when the diagnosis came, once scrubbed dishes late into the evening while whispering names in prayer she dared not say aloud. But lately they'd grown tired, not broken, just tired. There was a small ache in her knuckles, a familiar creak when she reached for her Bible. Even the act of smoothing the quilt on her lap had slowed into a ritual of reverence. Her hands no longer needed to do so much. And slowly, she was learning how to let go. Take a deep breath. Rest here for a moment. Exkum. The truth was, she didn't know when it began. The loosening, the releasing, the quiet surrender of roles once worn like armor. Mother, caretaker, friend, helper, organizer, warrior. Now she simply was. Not less, not small, but quieter, deeper, still full of love, but no longer needing to control the shape of it. She sat near the fireplace, sunlight caught in the lace curtains, her Bible open beside a cooling cup of tea. She hadn't marked the page. She didn't need to. The verse always found her, "I will carry you." And she believed it now more than ever, not just in theory, but in the way her body softened against the cushion, in the way her breath settled into God's rhythm, in the way the room didn't feel so empty, even in its quiet. She whispered softly, "I don't need to hold it all anymore. Do I?" And the stillness answered her back, "No, child, you never did. You can let go, not in despair, not in fear, but in love, because the hands that hold the stars have never loosened from you." And tonight, as your hands rest quietly in your lap, know this: God is holding everything you thought you had to carry. You are not alone. You are not forgotten. You are not too weary to be held. You make known to me the path of life. In your presence there is fullness of joy. At your right hand are pleasures forevermore. Psalm 16:11. There was a chair near the back door. It wasn't new. The fabric had faded where the sun touched it each afternoon. The arms were smooth from decades of quiet elbows resting there. It faced the garden, not for convenience, but for comfort. Elaine had moved it there the spring after her husband died. She'd pushed it herself, slowly, across the hardwood floor, and angled it just right so she could see the rose bushes without turning her head too much. And from that spot, day after day, season after season, she watched the garden grow, sometimes wild, sometimes patient, sometimes more weeds than blossoms, but always alive. Take a deep breath. Rest here for a moment. This morning, she watched the breeze move through the tall grass near the fence, not in a rush, not urgent, just there faithful, invisible, like the nearness of God. The garden had become more than a view. It was a kind of prayer, a parable in color, where nothing was hurried and everything bloomed when it was ready. Elaine often found herself whispering thank yous without even realizing, for the sunlight, for the wrens hopping along the stepping stones, for the way the rosemary plant refused to die no matter how many winters came. She used to keep a list of things to pray for, taped it to the fridge, beside photos and clipped scripture verses. But lately, her prayers came more like breath, like sitting in a chair, facing a garden and letting God do all the talking. She smiled at that thought. He always was the better listener, she whispered. And just then, A monarch butterfly fluttered past the glass. Elaine didn't reach for her phone, didn't try to hold the moment. She simply received it. The beauty, the light, the holiness of being alive in a body that still ached, but in a soul that had never felt more whole. You don't need to chase joy. You only need to face it. Sit still enough to see it. Turn your chair toward what is real and let it come. Because joy, true joy, does not come from noise or speed or control. It comes from presence, from sitting in the light and knowing the one who made you still delights in watching you sit with him, just as you are, just here. No performance, no pressure, just peace, just presence, just the garden and the God who walks in it still, before a word is on my tongue. You, Lord, know it completely. Psalm 139, 4. It sat tucked in the drawer of her nightstand, beneath a neatly folded handkerchief, a bookmark she'd once made for church, and a faded receipt from the local grocer, dated nearly 6 years ago. The envelope had no stamp, no address, only one word written across the front, in soft cursive. Jesus. Elaine had written the letter one evening, long after the lights were off and the world had quieted into night. It wasn't a prayer, exactly. More like a confession, more like a pouring out. She hadn't intended to keep it, but she also hadn't felt ready to throw it away. Somehow, it felt sacred, and sacred things should never be rushed. Take a deep breath. Rest here for a moment. That evening had been particularly still. One of those nights where the ache for heaven was more than a whisper. She had sat with a pen in her hand and written, slowly, line by line. Dear Jesus, I don't know how to explain how tired I am. Not just my body, but something deeper. It's like I've carried too many names, too many years. Sometimes I forget what joy feels like. Sometimes I wonder if I've loved well enough. Have I disappointed you? Have I drifted too quietly to be noticed? Do you still see me on nights when even I forget who I used to be? She paused then. Let the page rest. Tears had welled gently but not spilled. They were part of the ink now, invisible but real. And below her questions, without even knowing why, she had written one last sentence. If you're still listening, I'm still here. She'd folded the letter slowly, placed it in the envelope, wrote his name like it was enough, and it was. Elaine never opened it again. She didn't need to, because something in her heart changed the moment she finished. Not because she received an answer, but because she remembered he'd been listening before she even picked up the pen. She smiled now, years later, running her fingers across the edge of the envelope. She didn't cry. She didn't ache. She just felt known. Not because she had written it all down, but because he had seen her before the ink, before the sigh, before the silence. You don't need perfect words to be understood by God. You don't need to send the letter. He already read it the moment your soul whispered, You are fully heard, fully seen, fully loved. And every letter you've ever written in your heart, He has kept, even the ones you forgot to send. My times are in your hands. Psalm 31:15. There was a clock in the hallway, round, wooden, ticking steadily for decades like a heartbeat stitched into the walls. Elaine had grown used to it. The sound had always been there, gentle, predictable. It had kept rhythm through holidays and hospital calls, birthdays and funerals, long winters and short nights. But one morning, she noticed it had stopped. The pendulum stilled, the hands frozen at 3:41. No ticking, just silence. She stood beneath it for a while, hand resting on her cane, head tilted, and to her surprise, she didn't feel the urge to wind it. Take a deep breath. Rest here for a moment. At Mans, years ago, she might have worried, wondered how many hours had passed, wondered if she had missed something, fallen behind, fallen short. But now she only breathed deeper and smiled, because silence had taught her something that ticking never could. That time wasn't something she had to measure. It was something she could inhabit. She made a pot of tea without glancing at the hands on the stove. She sat longer than usual beside the window. She listened to the birds until their song felt more like liturgy than background noise. For the first time in a while, Elaine felt no pull to count, no need to prove that the day had been useful. She just was, alive, awake, beloved, and in the hush of that quiet hallway where the clock had grown still, she whispered, "My times are in your hands." Not the ticking hands of a clock, not the busy hands of expectation, but His hands, the one who saw her through every chapter, even the ones no one else ever read. She reached up and touched the face of the clock, a soft tap on the cool glass, and then she walked away, not hurried, not worried, just held, because she no longer needed the hours to tell her what mattered. She had learned to listen to the presence instead, to the sacred pause in the middle of a morning, to the holy rhythm of a life that trusts rather than strives. You don't have to keep time to live well. You don't have to rush to matter. You are not behind. You are not forgotten. God is not pacing. He is not watching the clock. He is simply watching you, loving you in every moment, whether measured or still. Open for me the gates of the righteous. I will enter and give thanks to the Lord. Psalm 118:19. There was a window in Elaine's bedroom that caught the evening light just right. Every sunset, like a quiet visitor, slipped through the old pane of glass and spilled gently across the floor, golden and unbothered, stretching slowly over the worn rug, the edge of the dresser, the soft folds of her quilt. She didn't always notice it in her younger years. Back then, the evening meant dinner, dishes, returning phone calls, scheduling, sorting. But lately, she had learned to sit still as the sun slipped low and let the light speak. Take a deep breath. Rest here for a moment. Zirke. That particular evening, the sky turned a shade of pale apricot, as if heaven were pressing close through something translucent. Elaine sat in her wooden rocker, a blanket tucked across her knees, the window open an inch, enough for the air to carry in the scent of rosemary and dust and dusk. And she whispered, as she often did at that hour I'm still here, Lord. No one else heard, no one else needed to. It wasn't a cry for help. It was a declaration of faith that she hadn't given up, that she still believed that even when the world forgot her name, he hadn't. The light moved slowly across the walls, brushing past her bookshelf, her small collection of greeting cards, her childhood photo in its chipped frame, and in that soft glow, Elaine felt something rise in her, a sense of invitation, not to do, not to change, just to open, just to let the nearness of God come in through the cracks of her ordinary life. She looked at the glass and said softly, "This is the gate, isn't it? Not a gate of metal, not a gate of duty or performance, but a gate of stillness, of beauty, of surrender, where the Spirit could enter like evening light and sit with her a while. You don't have to climb the stairs to heaven. Sometimes it comes down to your chair, to your breath, to your prayer that sounds like a sigh. He meets you there. He enters quietly, not through cathedral doors, but through kitchen windows, hospital rooms, and quiet bedrooms at dusk. You are not waiting for heaven. Heaven is leaning towards you, right now, right here, through the window, through the silence, through the light that rests on your lap like an old friend. Open the window, not with your hands, but with your heart. He will come. He always does. In the same way, the Spirit helps us in our weakness. We do not know what we ought to pray for, but the Spirit Himself intercedes for us through wordless groans. Romans 8:26. Elaine kept a journal beside her bed, the kind with lined pages and a soft fabric cover, its edges worn from years of night thoughts and the half-written prayers. She didn't write in it every day, not anymore. But when she did, she never forced her words to be beautiful. She wrote simply, honestly, without punctuation sometimes, because prayer, she believed, wasn't graded, only received. But one night in late autumn, her pen paused mid-sentence, and she never picked it up again. Take a deep breath. Rest here for a moment. The page held only a few words. Lord, I don't even know what to say tonight. And then nothing. No comma. No amen. Just stillness. Elaine had intended to finish it. She had planned to circle back and find the right phrase for what weighed on her chest, but instead, she had closed the journal gently and turned off the lamp and trusted that God knew the rest. She remembered the scripture, the one she'd read in her 20s, when grief first brushed against her life. The Spirit intercedes with groanings too deep for words. She hadn't understood it then, but now It felt like breathing, a kind of quiet surrender to a God who never waited for perfect sentences. Elaine didn't need to explain anymore. She had spent years thinking she did, as if clarity made her more faithful, as if her worth was in her eloquence. But these days, she prayed more with silence than syllables, and she believed deep in her bones that God heard every unfinished word as clearly as if she had spoken it aloud. You don't have to finish the prayer. You don't have to wrap your pain in language before God can touch it. He hears the pause, the sigh, the silence at the end of your breath when the day has left you too weary to speak. And in that hush, He leans near, closer than your own thoughts, softer than the blankets pulled up to your chest. Because prayer was never about being heard. It was about being known. And He knows you, even in the gaps, even in the silence, even when the page is left open with just a single line and an ache too deep for words. As a mother comforts her child, so will I comfort you. Isaiah 66:13. There was a drawer Elaine hadn't opened in a long time, not because she forgot it, but because she remembered too well. Inside, it were a few old scarves, folded, faded. One of them still smelled like rosewater and old cedar drawers, her mother's scent. She hadn't touched it in years. Grief had a way of curling up in fabric. But that afternoon, with the rain tapping gently on the kitchen roof, Elaine opened the drawer as if the moment had finally become soft enough. Take a deep breath. Rest here for a moment. Son, she lifted the scarf slowly. It was blue, a soft, deep blue, the color of dusk before the stars come out. Her mother used to wear it on Sundays, tied neatly beneath her chin, a quiet dignity that never asked to be noticed, but always carried peace. Elaine brought it close to her face, and there it was, that scent so faint, but still there. Not just perfume, but memory, presence, comfort. She sat down in the kitchen chair, folded the scarf in her lap, and wept, not out of despair, but from the kind of aching that feels like reunion. It was as if time had folded in on itself, and she was once again a girl being held by arms that knew how to quiet storms. She whispered, "I miss you," and then added, "I'm still trying to love people the way you did." The scarf rested gently in her hands like a prayer cloth, an inheritance not of wealth, but of tenderness. Elaine didn't need her mother to walk through the door. She just needed to remember that she was once held, and that kind of love doesn't fade. It echoes, it shapes, it becomes the kind of comfort you pass on without realizing. You don't have to forget who you've lost in order to move forward. And you don't have to hide your longing to be comforted. Even now, the Lord wraps you in a love older than your breath, closer than your skin, deeper than your sorrow. As a mother comforts her child, He said, and He meant it. That comfort still lives in scarves, in rooms left untouched, in the quiet between tears, and in the arms of God, who mothered you before you were born and will still be there when your own breath grows thin. You are not forgotten. You are still being held. My cup overflows. Psalm 23:5. There was a teacup she used every morning, porcelain, chipped on the rim, painted with faded violets. It had been a wedding gift part of a full set once. Now, down to one. Elaine never minded. One cup was enough. It always had been. She rinsed it each evening, set it on the drying rack like a tiny ritual, and returned to it before the day had gathered too much noise. It had become a companion, this little cup, a reminder that small things were often sacred. Take a deep breath. Rest here for a moment. Aman as. That morning, as she poured the hot water over her tea bag, she paused not out of weariness, but reverence. She watched the steam rise, soft and curling like breath return to the sky. The cup didn't look full. She hadn't filled it to the brim. Her hands didn't like the spilling. But something in her heart whispered, "It's overflowing anyway." Not in the way the world measured it, but in the way heaven did, overflowing with peace that lingered even when no one came by, overflowing with grace that softened the edges of her solitude, overflowing with mercy that met her on quiet mornings and never once scolded her for staying in bed longer than planned. She carried it to the table and sat in the usual chair, the one by the window, where the light came in slowly, unrushed. She held the cup in both hands, let the warmth travel through her knuckles, into her wrists, into the places that still remembered how to lift and hold and pour out for others. And in that stillness, she prayed without words, the kind of prayer that only needs breath, the kind that says, "Thank you for this moment, this tea, this table, this breath, this life." Elaine had come to believe that overflow didn't mean abundance in things. It meant sufficiency in God. It meant that when the world forgot you, He remembered. When others moved on, He sat still. When you had no more to give, He poured more in. Enough for the next day, enough for the next sigh, and some days enough to give away again. You don't need a full cupboard to live a full life. You don't need to feel strong to hold what He gives. You only need to be willing to receive. The cup may feel small, but in His hands, it never runs dry. Even now, He's pouring gently into you, for you. Let it overflow. Let it be enough. The Lord your God is in your midst, a mighty one who will save. He will rejoice over you with gladness. He will quiet you by His love. He will exult over you with singing. Zephaniah 3:17. Elaine had once known every verse, hymns from her childhood, tucked inside memory like linen in a cedar chest. She used to sing them in the kitchen as she cooked supper for her family, or while folding sheets warm from the line. She sang them under her breath at funerals, a trembling lullaby for her own sorrow. But now, the words didn't always come. She would start a line, then lose it halfway through. The melody stayed, but the lyrics dissolved like footprints under gentle waves. Still, she hummed. Take a deep breath. Rest here for a moment. That morning, as the sun broke shyly over the trees, Elaine sat by the garden window. Birds darted at the feeder. A soft breeze carried the scent of mint and rain-wet leaves, and she began to hum. No reason, no planning, just a sound rising from somewhere deep, like water drawn up from a well. She didn't know the name of the hymn. She didn't remember the verses, but the melody wrapped around her like a shawl, and something holy stirred. It wasn't the song that mattered, but the heart behind it, the longing, the memory of faith, the note of worship that came not from lips but from spirit. She stopped trying to remember the right lines. She just hummed, eyes closed, hands still, heart open. And there, in that moment, she sensed something extraordinary. The feeling that someone was humming with her, not from the room, but from within it, from beyond it. She paused, listened. The silence was not empty. It was full of presence, of a melody older than time and more familiar than her own name. She remembered the verse, "He will rejoice over you with singing." And suddenly she knew. She didn't need to remember the words, because he remembered them for her. He was the song. He was the harmony. He was the one who sang when her voice faltered, who carried the melody when she forgot the tune. You don't need perfect memory to offer perfect praise. You don't need eloquence to worship. You only need willingness, softness, an open spirit, and he will meet you there. You may forget the words, but he never forgets your voice, and he still sings over you. Even now, the light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. John 1:5. Evening had always been her favorite hour, the time when the world quieted, when the birds tucked themselves into branches and the sky folded itself into deeper colors. But lately, Elaine noticed something new. The light stayed longer than it used to. Not the sun. That still dipped behind the hills at the same hour, but something else. A softness, a presence, a quiet glow that remained even when the lamps were switched off and the last teacup washed. It wasn't a light for the eyes. It was a light for the soul. Take a deep breath. Rest here for a moment. She noticed it most clearly one Thursday evening. The clouds had scattered like pale thread across a lavender sky. She had already folded her blanket, turned the radio off, and leaned back in her chair. The room should have felt dim, but it didn't. There was a warmth in the air, a hush filled with kindness. Not absence, but presence. She looked around the room, half expecting to see someone standing there, but there was no one, not with eyes. Still, her heart knew Jesus was here, not because of something she had done, but because of who he was. He had always been light, even when the world turned grey, even when the candles burned low, even when her eyesight blurred and her memory slipped. She had spent years believing she needed to reach toward God. But here, in this soft quiet, she understood He had always been reaching for her. There was no fear in this dusk, only gentleness, only promise. She whispered, almost without thinking. You stayed, and the silence that followed was not empty. It was filled with joy, like the nod of a friend who has nothing left to prove because love has already spoken. You don't need to fear the falling of night, because the light that called stars into being now dwells in you, and no darkness, no grief, no goodbye can put it out. His light doesn't flicker, it remains, it comforts, it carries. Even now, when the sun slips away and the world falls still, He shines on. In your room, in your breath, in the quiet spaces that used to feel alone. You are not in shadow, you are in His presence. And that light, His light, will never leave you. Your word is a lamp for my feet, a light on my path. Psalm 119, 105. Elaine's feet no longer moved like they used to. Once they had danced barefoot in summer grass, hurried down grocery aisles with a toddler's hand in hers, climbed steps 2 at a time just to answer a ringing phone. Now they moved slowly, measured, deliberate, but they still moved. And more than that, they still remembered the path. From her bedroom to the porch, from the chair by the window to the table with the tea, from grief to grace, from sorrow to stillness, from striving to rest. Take a deep breath. Rest here for a moment. Ikama. She didn't walk far these days. Just a few steps here, a few steps there, each one its own kind of prayer. She had learned to bless the places her feet carried her, not because they were remarkable, but because they were faithful. There was holiness in those little roots between rooms, between memories, between moments of waiting and moments of wonder. She thought sometimes about the long road of her life, the twists, the turns, the mountains that had seemed too high, until she looked back and realized He had climbed them with her, always one step ahead, always knowing the way. She remembered Psalm 119. How many times had she underlined that verse? Your word is a lamp for my feet. Yes, it had been not always a floodlight, not always clear far ahead, but always enough for the next step. Even when she didn't know where she was going, He had. Even when she felt lost, He was leading. And now, as her steps grew smaller and the road shorter, she felt it even more. She was still on the path, still being guided, still walking home. You don't need to rush. You don't need to see the whole road. You only need to take the next step in the light He gives. Because He is not only at the end, He is beside you in every movement, in every hesitation, in every sacred shuffle forward. And one day, your feet will find the last bend in the road, and around it Jesus, smiling, open arms, barefoot on holy ground. Welcome home. He'll say, "And your feet, your tired, beautiful, faithful feet will finally rest, not in shadow, not in striving, but in light, forever. In returning and rest, you shall be saved. In quietness and trust shall be your strength." Isaiah 30:15. The house had gone quiet. Not the kind of quiet that comes from emptiness, not the hollow kind, but a rich stillness, like something sacred was unfolding, like heaven itself was holding its breath in reverence. Elaine sat in her chair by the garden-facing window. The light had grown dim, but not heavy. She hadn't said a word in hours, didn't feel the need. There were no more things to solve, no more things to explain, no more people to prove anything to. Only stillness. And in that stillness, God. Take a deep breath. Rest here for a moment. She had once filled her days with movement and her prayers with words. But now, as the sun set beyond the trees, as the gold slipped into lavender, as her breath slowed into rhythm with grace, Elaine felt the truth she had spent a lifetime reaching toward finally settle into her bones. She didn't need to do anything to be loved. She didn't need to be productive to be held. She didn't need to speak to be heard. She only needed to be, and God, the one who had always been whispering in the background, waiting in the quiet corners, sitting beside her in the empty chair, was here, fully here, like silence that speaks louder than thunder, like peace that doesn't ask questions, like presence that no longer needs to be proven. Elaine closed her eyes, and in the stillness, she heard him, not with ears but with the soul. "I have always been with you." Tears welled gently, but did not fall. There was no grief, only release, only rest. She remembered Isaiah's words from years ago. "In quietness and trust shall be your strength." And for the first time in her life, she didn't try to be strong. She just was, because he was. You don't have to fill the silence for God to be present. You don't have to explain your heart for him to understand it. He meets you in the stillness, and in that stillness, he speaks softly, steadily, lovingly. "I am here. I am yours. I am enough." And when everything else fades, his whisper remains. A forever kind of love, wrapped in quiet, wrapped in light, wrapped in peace. He will cover you with his feathers, and under his wings you will find refuge. His faithfulness will be your shield and rampart. Psalm 91. For she didn't plan for it. Letting go rarely comes with ceremony. No trumpet, no spotlight, just stillness, a whisper, a soft yes from somewhere deep inside. Elaine sat, hands resting lightly on the arms of her chair, head turned toward the window, eyes half closed. The garden blurred into soft colors beyond the glass. A breeze stirred the lace curtain, and then, without fear, without pain, without resistance, she let go. Take a deep breath. Rest here for a moment. There was no struggle, only breath falling gently into breathlessness, only peace rising like morning light from the floorboards. And in that sacred moment, she knew she wasn't falling. She was being carried, not by memory, not by legacy, but by love himself. Arms everlasting, wings wide enough for every sorrow, a mercy soft as feathers but strong as eternity. She had feared this once, this part, the great letting go. But now it felt like being gathered, like being lifted from the smallness of her aches into the vastness of a God who remembered her name. She saw no tunnel, heard no choir, only the gentlest hush, and a voice firm and kind that whispered, "You're home." And somehow that word carried every answered prayer, every forgiven moment, every ache that had ever turned into praise. Elaine was no longer trying. She didn't need to. She was safe, held, whole. The teacup still sat on the table. The scarf still rested in its drawer. The hymn still lingered in the air. But her soul was soaring. You do not need to fear the end, because for those who belong to Him, there is no end. Only a letting go of what you never needed to carry. Only a falling into the arms that were waiting from the first breath. He covers you now. He carries you still. And under His wings, you are finally, eternally at rest. Final whispered reflection. Let go now. You don't have to hold everything together. Let Him carry what you can't. Let Him sit beside your breath tonight. Let Him gather your weariness into His hands and trade it for peace. He's never been far, and now He is closer than breath. Sleep, beloved. Let your soul be still. You are not falling. You are being held. Amen. You made it to the end of the story, but the peace, that's just beginning. Jesus saw every moment of your life, the beautiful ones, the lonely ones, the ones that still ache quietly inside your chest. And through it all, He never let go. So tonight, you don't have to try so hard. You don't have to figure anything out. You can let go because you are being held, still, always. Sleep now, beloved child of God. You are not falling. You are being carried. Amen.